Hey guys, let's take a look at Business Math B Project 5A page 1. This page is all about doing calculations involving break-even points, and as you see on the spreadsheet here, it looks a little bit different than the PDF format that you have. That's just because I reformatted it for my own purposes for Excel, but this is the same sheet. Let's get started by taking a look at the top portion of it. You can see I've already pointed to in red the actual spreadsheet part of this. So you can see we're given this table that involves selling price per deck, estimated sales, total fixed cost per deck, variable cost per deck, and break-even point. And there are a few blanks, and we need to fill in those blanks based on information that we already have in the table. So, starting with fixed cost per deck, let's look at this column and see if we can fill in the information. Now, on tables where you kind of have your pick of where you want to begin, I tend to do each column where the calculations are all of the same kind. I try to do each of those in turn, and I work left to right. That's just my method, again, and this only applies to spreadsheets where you're able to pick and choose like that. For example, in Project 3, you weren't able to do it that way. But anyway, so I'm just choosing to do columns left to right in case you're wondering why I'm starting there. So if I want to calculate fixed cost per deck, I take the total fixed costs and I divide by estimated deck sales. And again, this information is going to come from that spreadsheet. So if I look at it, again, fixed cost per deck, total fixed costs, so I would look to that column, and I would divide by estimated deck sales. Okay, so I'm simply dividing one by the other. Now to set this up, you would just look at the corresponding row. So for example, my yellow blank is in the second row. So I can see that I need to use the information for the second row. I'll plug in 12,000 for sales, and I'll plug in 85,000 for total fixed cost. So when I go and I set this up, I'll have that. Let me switch back to my pen here. I will have that my fixed cost per deck is equal to my total fixed cost. I can see that that's $85,000 divided by estimated deck sales. I can see that that is 12,000. That's going to give me my fixed cost per deck, and that'll be my answer to that first blank. And I'll use the same method to figure out the second blank right here. Right, so once again, plugging in my total fixed cost, dividing that by my estimated sales. And next we'll come to break-even point. That's the next column I see that has blanks in it that we need to fill in. And you'll pull up your equation for break-even point. And break-even, and this is in units, is going to be total fixed cost divided by the difference of selling price per unit and variable cost per unit. And why don't we go ahead and, just as before, set up an example of that. So let's take a look. So break even in units is going to be equal to, once again, we've got total fixed cost, and I've already got that column highlighted. I'm dividing by selling price per unit, which is this column here, selling price per unit. The difference of that and our variable cost per unit, or in this case, it's really per deck. My variable cost per deck. So you can see I've highlighted the columns that I'm going to be using here, and remember the number that you're grabbing is simply the number in the corresponding row. So since I'm trying to fill in this blank in the third row for break-even point, I will set it up by taking my total fixed cost of $85,000, my selling price of $11.95, and my let's see what's last, my variable cost per unit of $3. So when I set this up, it'll look like this. I will have my break-even in units equals total fixed cost, which is $85,000, divided by the difference of selling price per unit, which is $11.95, minus my variable cost per deck per unit is $3. So there's my setup, and then I'll simplify, and that'll give me break even in units, and that'll be that blank there. And I'll use the same method to fill in the other boxes, and that'll complete our table. Next, you'll move on to these kind of short answer questions, and some of them require calculation, some of them are really more theory-based. So question 1 asks you, what are the total costs per deck to produce 13,000 decks that sell for $10.95 each? Again, what are the total costs per deck to produce 13,000 decks that sell for $10.95 each? And my hint on that one is that because they're asking for total cost, you will be using the total cost equation, which I've written out for you right here. So total cost equals fixed cost per unit plus variable cost per unit. When they ask for the total costs in questions 1 and 2, that's what you'll be using there. And notice that they're giving you, they're giving you the number of decks, 13,000, right? And then the $10.95 each. Same thing here, they're telling you to produce a certain number of decks that sell for a certain amount per deck. Okay, so they're giving you the information, and you'll use this total cost equals fixed cost per unit plus variable cost per unit. So keep that in mind for questions 1 and 2. When you look at 3 and 4, again, these are a little bit more theory-based. For numbers 3 and 4, my hint to you is that if your break-even point exceeds the number of units you're going to sell, you're going to lose money. Again, if your break-even point is bigger than the number of units you're going to sell, you'll lose money, right? Because if you're not selling enough to break even, obviously you're in the negative. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out which price points are most likely to create a loss. Look for ones where the break-even point is larger than the number of units sold. Okay, same thing with number 4. Why are fixed costs to produce 1345 decks so much greater than the fixed cost to produce 1095? Use your information from numbers 1, 2, and 3 to kind of help inform your answer on that one, and I think you'll get it. Keep in mind for these guys, although I do look for answers that are correct in a sense, I am more than anything looking for a reasonable and well-explained answer. So keep that in mind, and hopefully this has helped you out for this first page of the project.